Hello. Today I will be covering the Soviet cruiser, T6 cruiser, the Budyonny. Now, this is in my opinion possibly the strongest T6 cruiser. It's absolutely one of the strongest and possibly the strongest out of them all. I probably would even rate it above the Molotov, because while the Molotov has very strong guns, the rest of the ship isn't really that good, whereas the Budyonny is pretty much a complete package. A very strong cruiser. The only real downside of it is the lack of turn rate on it, or the turn radius is pretty massive. I think it's 890 meters, something similar. It turns like a brick, but other than that, it has excellent strengths, especially the guns on it. Decent rate of fire, very flat trajectories, extremely long range for T6, and with basically both the HE and AP are very strong on it. Another strength of it is of course the armor. It's actually significantly tankier than the T7, which is the Shores. That is, the Shores is pretty much a paper cruiser compared to the Budyonny. So if you angle yourself, you can tank a surprising amount of battleship shells without many issues at all, actually. And another strength worth mentioning are the torps, but I will actually demonstrate and show those off a bit later. Right now I'll be mostly focusing on the gunpowder of the ship. Now, here you pretty much see the first example, which is of course the range. Absolutely, and you can see the flat arcs. If that was a Cleveland, if I was a Cleveland shooting at that Cleveland, hitting him from this range would be quite the challenge. On the ship, it's very easy. I accidentally had AP loaded, but I still got 2 pens and 2 over pens. Well, I meant to have HE loaded, of course. So that gives you an idea of just how strong the AP on the ship is. It's very potent at all ranges, but at this range I prefer using HE, because getting citadels at this range is nigh impossible, pretty much regardless of what cruiser you are, unless of course you're a Moskva or something. So in general I'm just going to stick to HE, I angle away and I just start hammering them, using my fantastic range and my ability to hit from this range. In fact, you can harass battleships surprisingly well as well. I'm actually, let's see if is he peeking around. The Cleveland is behind the cliff. He's actually turning away, so no point shooting. I'm gonna shoot at the New Mexico. Even though I can't actually lock target on him, you can still shoot where he's predicted to go, even if you can't lock target on him. You'll suffer a dispersion penalty because you shot before you had the lock on. As you can see, my dispersion is pretty horrid, but you can still shoot where they're predicted to go, and you can score hits with it, which you can see I actually got 3 hits and a fire on him, even though he was technically outside of my range. But since he was sailing into it, there wasn't an issue. Once again, keep an eye out on the top right. When you play any sort of HE spammer, you always want to keep an eye out on the top right, and if you get any recent fires. In this case, the damage has stopped ticking on the top right, which tells me the New Mexico has repaired. That automatically makes the New Mexico my absolute primary target here. Not only is it of course a strong ship, but it's also quite slow and fairly big, quite easy to hit, especially at long range as I am playing. But now that he has used his repair, any fires I get on him will be unrepairable. So I can inflict significant damage on him just by focusing HE on him. It looks like I'm being shot at, so I'm turning hard left. My speed is... I don't even know if he's shooting me or the New Mexico. I did manage to get 2 fires on him, which is nice, because he won't be able to repair those 2, and he will eat significant damage because of that. And it looks like the rest of the team started focusing him as well. That's pretty common. If someone goes low, the other people start focusing him as well, and it kind of like snowballs from there. See a Fiji reversing, trying to hit him. Fiji of course takes significant damage no matter what you're using, but it looks like this guy's is he going to be able to reverse at the cover? He's always just trying to reverse until he can smoke up again. Bit of an interesting tactic there. I'm using as you can see from my positioning, of course, I'm using the island to cover myself from all the enemies north of me, so I'm basically fighting only one target at a time, and basically zoning myself away from all the dangerous targets on the right. Now I see the York pushing up, so I kind of want to close the distance and get AP loaded so I can delete him. Of course I need to once I get around this corner, I have to take a peek at what the battleships are doing. The Fuso looks like he's sailing away, but whenever you do this kind of thing, it's a good idea to always check to see what they are doing. If you start seeing one of the battleships suddenly turning your way, that's a good sign that you need to start angling. Switch to AP for this York as he's coming around the corner, and instant shooting with the AP. Quick peek at the Fuso to see if his guns are turning. Once again, that's something I mentioned in many of my cruiser commentaries. Always keep an eye out on battleship guns, because battleship guns tell you the intention of the battleship before he even shoots. And if you start seeing the guns turn, that's a good time to start angling, especially in a ship with like the Budyonny, where the armor actually is strong enough to stand up to that. Here you see, of course, the strength of the AP. That York is, well, was quite heavily angled. He's no longer heavily angled, but the AP still has no issues either overpenning or penning him in general and doing significant damage to him. I won't actually be able to secure this kill. That's unfortunate. Now my switching... Yeah, there's nothing to shoot here with the AP. I'm going to switch to HE and start harassing the Fuso on the right. I don't want to push around this corner and fight the Scharnhorst 1 versus 1. Since, in my opinion, Scharnhorst is basically just a heavier cruiser, and he excels at fighting other cruisers, so of course I have no intention of going there to take a 1 versus 1 with him. That would be a highly skewed battle in his favor. Now Bliska smoked up here, so I'm gonna see if he glides out of the smoke. I'll try to punish him, but it looks like he's not gliding out now. He's just popped an offensive smoke and he's gonna start harassing me. So naturally I turn away, I angle away from it, and I'm just gonna get some distance. I have no interest in trying to rush that smoke, and in general I'm not really in a hurry. We have a ship lead, and I would just lose a massive ton of HP trying to close the distance and risk getting torped, so I just make some distance between me and him instead. No point taking on the Bliska basically in his battlefield, which is his own smoke where he's sitting in. Instead I just harass the Fuso using the great range and the great HE, with the great fire chance of course, because of how many shells you're constantly spamming out. So trying to get some fires on the Fuso while I create some distance between me and the smoked up DD. And it looks like the Scharnhorst and the Shores are pushing in from the other side. So I'm once again harassing the Fuso a bit. Looks like he's going to burn to death from my fires, and I turn around and deal with the Scharnhorst. Now it looks like the Scharnhorst is going to get out of range. You of course have the spotting plane. You can't use a fighter plane, sadly. I always prefer the fighter plane for obvious reasons, better anti-air and scouting of torpedoes and other ships and such. But the spotting plane is useful in rare situations like this one. I thought he would sail outside of my normal range. That's why I popped it here, to get some additional damage in while I close the distance of course. At this range the Scharnhorst isn't that much of a threat, since once again you can angle your great armor against him, but always harass him, always harass battleships. If there's nothing else to shoot at, taking pot shots at the battleship is always a good idea, especially if they make this fundamental mistake I still see battleships make, which is repairing the first fire. It's so common, and people still do it. You saw the New Mexico do it, and you saw the Scharnhorst do it. That instantly, as I said earlier in the commentary, him repairing that fire makes him my primary target now. I have no interest in the Bliska. Well, I will of course shoot him if he does pushing closer, since that will net me more XP and help the team more, but the Bliska is kind of keeping the island between me and him. So I'm just staying here basically. You notice I'm undetected because I'm kind of zoned out. I'm behind the island shooting these guys, so he can't even see where he's being shot from. So I started 2 fires on him. Oh wait, or was that 2 or 3? I think I might have even 3 fires on him at this point. And he's just burning because he's used his repair, so I'm not in any hurry to waste shells on him now, since the Bliska is coming around the corner. I'd rather punish him, get rid of this threat, and of course pay him back for earlier when he smoke shelled me. He didn't even know I was here, because earlier when I shot I was completely undetected, so he didn't even know what he was sailing into. That's why it caught him completely by surprise that I was still here, and he got completely wrecked because of that. The fires have run out on the Scharnhorst, so time to start renewing them on him again. Just took a quick detour dealing with the Bliska, but time to refresh the fires on the Scharnhorst. Once again, this is fairly short distance, actually less than 14 kilometers, so you don't really have much issues landing shells at this distance. And I get to angle against both the Cleveland and him at the same time, which is of course fantastic for me. I think he's focusing on the Nagato. They consider him the bigger threat, which is... That's kind of the thing, you kind of poke people to death with this ship, except with the AP at close range. But in general you kind of just poke and poke and poke, and people don't take it as that big of a threat until suddenly you have a bunch of fires on you that you can't repair, and then you're like, oh shit, the Budyonny. I completely forgot about that guy. He slowly withered me to death. There we go, another fire on him. Which... can he repair? Or did he use his repair earlier? He might have used his repair earlier. And another fire. And he's got a nice little bonfire going there. Don't really gonna bother wasting any more shells on him for a while. Since he's cooking nicely, I'm gonna focus on the Cleveland instead. Cleveland is a ship that you pretty much hard counter, honestly, because long range, you have so much better arcs than him. Close range, your armor is so much stronger that you can switch to AP and wreck him. And then there's of course the Torps, which are fantastically strong. I'll cover the Torps a bit more later on, but you make for a great YOLO ship as well. And that's kind of the deal against pretty much every cruiser in the game at T6. You just counter them all. Or like, well, not counter, but you have advantages. It's a fight you should be able to win. The Scharnhorst is burning to death, as I said. Witherer, that's 60,000 pure fire damage. Arsonist, because I basically burned him to death. And now I focus on the Cleveland. Of course I use HE, not AP, because as I said before, the Cleveland is very, very lightly armored, so your HE does significant damage on him. And I don't have to risk any overpens and such. So that's the Cleveland did as well. And I actually have a pretty good chance at Kraken here. The Farragut, they have one DD left. The Farragut, well, the two battleships are too far south that I doubt I have any chance of actually killing them. But the Farragut just captured our base cap, which is what, C? So I doubt he will rush up the middle, because he knows there's a ton of ships here. It's kind of suicidal. So my guess, if I was him, I would sail for D as soon as possible. Try to capture D. That would probably be the best way to actually try to still win this game and secure the base XP. So I turn my ship around. Note I don't sail straight for D. Once again, as I did earlier, I use the terrain to my advantage. I want to use that cliff to hide my presence from D, because the concealment on the ship isn't that good. You can see just how far away, that transparent thing on the minimap, just how far away I'm spotted. In fact, I'm almost spotted all the way to the edge of D. So if I wasn't using this cliff to cover me, if the Farragut was going for D, he could see me a mile away and just avoid me. But by putting this cliff behind me, if he goes where I predict him to go, that is to D, then I will be able to surprise him, ambush him, come around this corner all of a sudden. He has no idea I'm coming, and I basically pop up right in front of his face. Of course, while I'm going this way, I'm also once again going to take use of my spotting plane that I mentioned earlier. I use it rarely, but I mean, if you have it, why not use it? For example, here the Warspite is out of range, but with the help of the spotter plane, I can shoot not only over the hill, but I can also reach him. If I could just see him, he's right behind that cliff. Let's try to get some pot shots at him. The DD went to D as I predicted, so I'm still closing the distance to D, of course. And any second now, there we go, I'm detected, and you see how close I am to him. He's caught completely by surprise. He's turning, he's panicked. Oh shit, why is this guy here? He wasn't expecting it at all, and deleted, got my Kraken. Of course, you're very, very strong against DDs because of these flat arcs, and the game ended right afterwards. So it gives you an idea of just how strong the guns alone are. And looking at the score, of course, well, a nice amount of credits for this tier of the game. And got the Kraken, a bunch of quests. They just released those quests, I think. The base XP tells the story, especially considering there was mostly T7s in this game. So it's always satisfying to top the scoreboard when you're one of the bottom tiers. And you can see the damage counter, just how much of the damage was purely from fire. Over 63,000 fire damage. So overall, the Budyonny has very, very good firepower. But now, let's move on to the Torpedoes. Now, what I didn't mention about the Torpedoes was that when you upgrade your hull, you actually get a 5 torpedo launcher on both sides of your ship. And these torpedoes deal 14.4k damage each, They are 65 knots, so they are quite fast, very hard to dodge. Sadly, they only have 4 km range, but thanks to the armor of the ship, so when you're actually closing the distance with battleships, if you manage to get close enough, you actually become a huge threat. And it's something I've used quite often when I see the opportunity for it. It's not something you should underestimate, because these torpedoes are fast, and because you launched so many, they pack a huge amount of damage in them. Here, of course, I don't mind grounding here, because I'm quite well in cover, I'm angled extremely well, and he's about to eat a whole fat surprise. Didn't land all the torps, but 4 torps pretty much completely wrecked his ship. Switched to AP. At this range you can easily pen battleships, and finished off the kill. These torps are no joke at all. Budyonny is following him up, and of course, well, why back off at this point? Just gonna keep pushing, because as I said, you have torp launchers on both sides. So once again, I will of course be using the terrain. I don't want to pop around the corner now that he's expecting me. It's clear that this Budyonny probably saw what happened to his body, or he knows what happened to his body, so I'm just gonna wait, moving extremely slowly. I want him to turn. You can keep an eye on the minimap, you can see what the Budyonny is doing. I'm waiting for him to commit to the turn and head this way, because you never want to charge out of cover. You want to charge out of cover at the very last moment, so it gives the battleship less time to shoot at you, less chance to get volleys off, less chance to actually delete you. So now that I see he's committed, he's turning in, this is where I start accelerating. I want to be at full speed when I get around this corner. And you can see it building up pretty much almost at full speed as I pop around, and surprise, right in the face of the battleship. Optimal timing pretty much. I'm angled against him, of course. It's a Budyonny though, which means he has quite big caliber guns, so he can do some damage, but you see, it's actually not that much. It's some damage, yes, but it's not the end of the world. Turning left after I wait, of course, after he has shot his volley before I make the turn. I don't want to make the turn before he has shot, because then I give him an easy citadel and basically negate the use of my armor and citadel and everything. Turning hard right again afterwards. He's dodging hard to dodge the torpedoes. He managed to dodge most of them, but by this time, well, you saw, first of all, I bounced all his shells, or a huge chunk of his shells once again, and by this time my other side has already reloaded, and the Budyonny has no more space to dodge. And here comes the next surprise. So this is what I mean when I say that these torpedoes are incredibly deadly, and they suit the Budyonny extremely well, because it's such a tanky ship. So if you pretty much automatically find plenty of opportunities where you can make use of these extremely deadly torpedoes, and they complement the ship extremely well, which is of course another one of the reasons why I consider this ship so strong. Anyway, let's move on to my recommended build. Alright, well, as usual I will start with the modules. Now the default range is actually 15 kilometers, which I think you can deal with quite well. So I highly recommend getting the hull first. It gives you a nice chunk of HP. You might notice that it upgrades your 2x3 launchers to 2x5. It might be hard to spot like this. Wait, let me unclick this hull so you can see it. Of course it adds a huge chunk to the reload, but still 2x5 torps are significantly stronger, since you pretty much only have one really chance of using both sides when you do YOLO in. It gives you some rudder shift, AA and such. So hull first, then get the range. Consumable wise, I always recommend a premium repair. Module upgrade wise, aiming armaments. You can use AA guns here. I prefer aiming systems for all the long range spamming I do, but you can use the AA range. But honestly, the AA isn't that good on this ship. But if it's there if you want to increase the panic range, if you use defensive AA. Steering gears to avoid losing rudder too often. And finally, of course, steering gears to get that rudder shift time down, since the turning circles are already 710, which isn't that good. Basics of survivability, expert marksman, superintendent, and demolition expert to increase the fires, before finally going for concealment expert, because, well, it's one of my favorite skills for a cruiser. Anyway, that was my Budyonny commentary. I hope you enjoyed it.